All right, ready to dive deep into some of those self-improvement myths? Those ideas that might actually be holding us back.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
You ever get that feeling like you need like a complete life makeover just to see any progress? Or maybe you're waiting for, I don't know, like a burst of motivation before you can even start on a goal.
Uh-huh, yeah.
Well, get ready to ditch those ideas. We're going to look at a more realistic and I think even more fun approach to personal growth.
Love it. I think a lot of these myths that we kind of accept as like universal truths can actually be more harmful than helpful.
Yeah, totally. So let's just jump right in. Let's start with this myth that I think we've probably all experienced. It's this idea that perfection equals improvement.
Hmm.
Have you ever like abandoned a project just because it wasn't perfect enough?
Yeah.
That feeling that if it's not flawless, it's just not worth doing at all.
Oh, all the time. And that's kind of where we get into trouble, I think.
Yeah.
Because that pursuit of perfection, it can lead to, procrastination, self-criticism, and just fear of even starting.
Oh, yeah.
It's like a trap. And there's actually research that shows that perfectionism is linked to, get this, lower levels of well-being and even depression.
Wow. Okay, so that's pretty serious. So if striving for perfection isn't the answer, what is?
Well, it's all about shifting that focus,
Yeah.
right? From perfection to progress, recognizing that setbacks are going to happen, and they're actually a crucial part of the whole process.
Yeah.
It's interesting. The text we have actually highlights this one study where participants who embraced their mistakes, they actually ended up performing better than the ones who tried to avoid making mistakes.
Huh, that makes sense. Like that whole saying, fail forward. It's not about not failing. It's about using those stumbles as stepping stones.
Exactly. So instead of trying to do a complete diet overhaul, and then giving up after a wink, what if you just try incorporating one healthy meal a day? It's those small, sustainable changes that build up over time.
Yeah, okay, so like progress over perfection, I'm liking that. But what about this idea that we have to make these like massive, sweeping changes in order to actually improve?
Oh, yeah.
Like quit your job, move to a new country, basically become a whole new person overnight.
Right. The rip it off like a Band-Aid approach.
Yeah.
It's so tempting to think that's the only way to see real change, but it's just so overwhelming.
It is. It's like you're trying to climb Mount Everest without any training.
Exactly. You're going to crash and burn.
Yeah.
So that's where I think this myth really falls apart. What's way more effective, and this is supported by research, is focusing on small, consistent actions.
Okay.
The text actually suggests spending even just 10 minutes each day on a new skill or habit. Sounds almost too simple, right?
Yeah.
But those little steps can create so much momentum.
I love that. It's like building a house brick by brick. You don't just magically have a finished house.
Right.
It takes time and consistent effort.
Totally. And speaking of consistency, let's talk about another myth that trips people up. I think this idea that motivation is the key to success. I know I've definitely fallen into that trap of waiting for inspiration to strike before I start something.
Oh, yeah, me too.
You think oh, I'll start when I feel motivated, but it never happens.
It really doesn't. I do that with like laundry.
Yeah.
Just waiting for the motivation.
But the thing is, motivation is actually the result of action, not the other way around. We think we need to feel motivated to take action, but really, it's the act of starting even just for a few minutes that sparks that motivation.
So we're not waiting for the motivation fairy to sprinkle us with magic dust.
Exactly.
We're choosing to act even when we don't feel like it.
Yeah, and that's where discipline comes in. It's showing up consistently even when that initial excitement kind of wears off.
It's like that habit of going to the gym even when you'd rather just stay home on the couch.
Exactly. All right, let's move on to another myth, shall we?
Okay, what do we have?
Overnight success, or should I say the illusion of overnight success.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, we are constantly bombarded with messages promising these quick fixes and instant transformations. But the truth is, lasting change takes time and effort.
Yeah, those get-rich-quick schemes or like the miracle weight loss products.
Yeah.
It's so easy to fall for that, especially when you see other people seemingly achieving success overnight.
Yeah, and social media doesn't help with that. We see these carefully curated highlight reels, and it's easy to forget that everyone has their own unique journey, with ups and downs.
Totally. It's like comparing your behind the scenes to someone else's perfectly edited movie.
Exactly. So I think the key is shifting our focus from that instant gratification to long-term growth. Whether it's building a business or learning a new language or mastering a skill, those things take time and dedication.
So instead of aiming for overnight success, we should be aiming for consistent progress.
Exactly. And that brings us to our final myth for today. The idea that self-improvement is a solo journey.
Ah.
Now, while there's definitely value in like taking ownership of our growth, we don't have to go it alone.
I'm so glad you brought that up. I used to think asking for help was like a weakness or something.
Yeah.
But I've come to realize it's actually a sign of strength. You know, being self-aware enough to know that you need support.
Absolutely. And research backs that up. People with strong social support systems, they tend to be more resilient, happier, and more successful in reaching their goals.
Interesting. So it's less about being a lone wolf on a mountaintop
Yeah.
and more like being part of a supportive hiking group.
Exactly. Whether it's
Yeah.
finding a mentor, joining a community, or just leaning on friends and family, connecting with others, gives us that guidance and accountability we need.
Awesome. Well, this has been super eye-opening. We've just busted 5 common self-improvement myths.
Yeah, ones that I think we've probably all fallen victim to at some point.
For sure. But now that we've like cleared the air, where do we go from here? What can we actually do to create lasting positive change?
Well, that's what we'll be getting into in part 2. We're going to explore some actionable tips and techniques. We'll dive deeper into the power of consistency, the importance of setting realistic goals, and how to cultivate self-compassion. So stay tuned.
Can't wait. This is going to be good. Okay, welcome back. I'm still kind of processing those myth-busting revelations from the first part.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing how freeing it can be to let go of those limiting beliefs.
Yeah, totally. It's like a weight has been lifted. But now I'm thinking, okay, we've cleared the mental clutter. Where do we actually go from here? How do we actually put these insights into action and make some lasting positive change?
That's the big question, right? And the good news is there are some really effective strategies that we can use.
Okay, I like
Right.
the sound of that. So where do we start?
Well, we talked about the importance of consistency over perfection, right?
Yeah.
Let's kind of unpack that a bit more. The text actually talks about this concept of micro progress.
Okay.
This idea that even like tiny actions can add up to big results over time.
I love that. It's like compound interest, but for personal growth.
Exactly. It's not about making these big changes or trying to do everything at once.
Yeah.
It's about consistently showing up, even when you don't feel like it, and taking small steps towards your goal.
Okay, so how do we actually do that? Can you give me some examples?
Sure. Let's say your goal is to write a novel.
Okay.
Instead of trying to write a whole chapter every day, what if you just commit to writing one page?
Yeah.
Or even just a paragraph?
Okay. Yeah.
The key is to make it so easy that you can't say no.
That makes sense. It takes the pressure off.
Right. And the text also mentions this technique called habit stacking. Have you heard of that?
No, I haven't. What is that?
Basically, it's like attaching a new habit to an existing one.
Okay.
So let's say you want to start meditating every morning. Instead of trying to create this whole new routine, you can just tack it onto something you already do, like brushing your teeth.
Yeah.
So you brush your teeth, and then you meditate for 5 minutes.
Okay, so you're basically using an existing habit to make it easier to add a new one.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Simple but effective. What about those times when, we hit a roadblock or we have a setback? How do we stay motivated and keep going?
Yeah, those are tough.
That's where patience comes in. We talked about this before, but it's so important. I mean, we live in a world where we want everything instantly,
Yeah.
but real growth just takes time. And the text actually talks about reframing our perspective on setbacks. So instead of looking at them as failures, we can see them as learning opportunities.
Okay, so instead of I messed up, it's what can I learn from this?
Exactly. And self-compassion is really important here. It's so easy to beat ourselves up when we make mistakes, but we need to be kind to ourselves.
Yeah, it's easy to forget to do that.
Right. Self-compassion isn't about making excuses. It's just recognizing that we're human and we all make mistakes.
We're allowed to be imperfect.
Exactly. And that ties into setting realistic goals. We often set these huge goals that set us up for disappointment.
Yeah.
The text suggests focusing on what they call process goals, goals that are more about the actions we take rather than the outcome.
Okay, can you give me an example of that?
Sure. An outcome goal would be like, I want to lose 10 pounds. A process goal would be, I'm going to exercise for 30 minutes 3 times a week.
Okay, so with the outcome goal, you're focused on the end result.
Right.
But with the process goal, you're focusing on what you can actually control.
Exactly. And the nice thing about process goals is you can celebrate them, even if you haven't reached the final goal yet.
I like that. You're acknowledging the journey, not just the destination.
Right. And speaking of celebrating progress, let's talk about tracking our wins. It's easy to focus on what we haven't done yet, but it's important to take time to appreciate how far we've come.
Yeah, like we're so busy climbing the mountain we forget to enjoy the view.
Exactly. Keep a journal or a list of your accomplishments, no matter how small.
Okay, good idea. It's a good way to counteract that negative self-talk.
Yeah. And that leads to another important element, discipline over motivation.
Okay, we touched on that a bit before. What's the difference exactly?
So motivation is that initial spark, that excitement that gets you started.
Yeah.
But motivation, it can be fleeting.
Oh, I know it. It's like when you start a new diet, you're all gung-ho for like 3 days and then...
Oof.
Yeah,
It's gone.
exactly.
And that's where discipline comes in. It's about showing up even when you don't feel like it.
So not relying on those fleeting feelings of motivation.
Yeah. It's about pushing through even when it's hard.
Okay.
The text actually mentions a study where they found that people who were more self-disciplined were actually happier and more successful.
Wow. Okay, so discipline really does matter.
It does. So how do we build that discipline?
Yeah, good question.
Start small. Don't try to change everything at once. Remember the 10-minute rule.
Yeah.
That's a perfect way to build discipline gradually.
Okay, so 10 minutes of meditation,
Yeah,
10 minutes of exercise, 10 minutes of writing, and then just build up from there.
exactly. Make small commitments and stick to them every day. Now, one of the toughest things is dealing with that inner critic.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh, yeah, that voice in your head that tells you you're not good enough.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it can really sabotage our efforts.
Yeah.
But the text emphasizes that those negative thoughts, they're just thoughts.
Okay.
They're not facts.
So don't let them run the show.
Right. We need to challenge those limiting beliefs
Okay.
and replace them with more positive ones. One thing you can try is just observe those thoughts without judgment. Notice them, acknowledge them, and then let them go.
Interesting.
So it's like detaching from those negative patterns.
Yeah.
You can also try reframing those negative thoughts. So instead of, I'm not good at this, you say, I'm learning and I'm making progress.
Yeah, I like that. It's a shift in perspective.
It is. And the more you practice these techniques, the easier it gets. This has been great.
Yeah, it has. We've covered so much. Micro progress, self-compassion, discipline.
We've given people some tools they can actually use.
Yeah, totally. But before we wrap up this part, I want to talk about the role of community and support.
Oh, yeah?
We mentioned it briefly before, but I think it's so important.
I agree. We can't underestimate the power of connection.
Okay, so let's dive into that in part 3. We'll explore the benefits of seeking support, different types of communities, and how to find the right one for you. Stay tuned. Oh, hey, welcome back to our final part of this deep dive. We've busted those self-improvement myths and explored some awesome strategies for actually creating change.
Right. Yeah.
Now it's time for like the grand finale, the power of community and support.
Yeah, I'm really excited to talk about this. This is something people often overlook, but it's so important for sustainable growth. The text mentions this study where people with a strong support system were way more likely to stick to their goals.
Oh, wow, that's interesting.
Yeah, it makes sense though, right? Having a community gives you that extra motivation and accountability.
It does, especially when things get tough.
It's like having a whole team of cheerleaders behind you.
Yeah, I love that.
They encourage you, give advice, and even just listen when you need to vent.
Totally. Okay, so what are some things our listeners can do to build that kind of support system?
First, you got to know what you're into, right? What are your passions, your goals?
Yeah, what are you working towards?
Once you know that, you can start looking for communities that match those interests.
Okay, like finding your tribe.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And there's so many options now. Local clubs, workshops, online groups.
Yeah, those online communities can be great.
Oh, for sure. Especially if you can't find something local. Or if you prefer being online.
Yeah.
The text even talks about the rise of online support groups, specifically for self-improvement.
That's cool. So let's say you found a group you like.
Okay.
What are some tips for making the most of that connection?
Be active. Share your experiences, ask questions, support others.
Yeah, be a part of it.
The more you put in, the more you get out.
Yeah.
And don't be afraid to be vulnerable.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one.
I know, we think it's a weakness, but it's not. Sharing your struggles, it actually builds trust and creates a stronger connection.
It makes it more real.
Right. And you don't have to limit yourself to just one community either.
Or that's true.
Different groups can give you different perspectives.
Like having a network of friends and mentors.
Exactly. And speaking of mentors, finding someone who's already achieved what you want can be so helpful.
Oh, yeah, mentorship is so valuable.
The text mentions a study about people with mentors being more likely to reach their career goals.
Wow. Okay, so how do you even find a mentor?
Think about people you admire. Could be someone in your field, a community leader, even just someone you know personally who inspires you.
Yeah, those role models.
Right. And then just reach out to them. Send an email, connect on social media, or just talk to them if you see them.
You never know, they might be happy to help.
Most people are, if you just ask. And remember, it doesn't have to be formal.
Yeah.
Just having regular chats with someone you admire can make a big difference.
That's a great point. Well, this whole conversation has been amazing.
Yeah, it has.
We've busted those self-improvement myths. We've learned some practical strategies.
And we've talked about the importance of community.
Yeah, it's been a really holistic look at self-improvement.
It really has. I hope people feel empowered to embrace their own growth now.
Me too. So as we wrap up this deep dive, any final words of wisdom?
Just remember, embrace the journey. Self-improvement is a process, not a destination. Be kind to yourself, celebrate your progress, and never stop learning.
Love that. And remember, you don't have to do it alone. Find your community, find your mentors, and reach your full potential. Couldn't have said it better myself. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We hope you've learned something new and are feeling inspired to create some positive change in your life. Keep exploring, keep growing, and keep shining. We'll